Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the different things going on around week one and who really needs a win. When I look at it, I think no one needs a win more than Billy Napier and the Florida Gators, but definitely a number of teams that need that first week win to go on to a big time season this upcoming year. But let's get into the coaches poll. There is a number of things coming out this time of year, a number of different things to talk about, and the coaches poll just came out, and I want to break it down for you guys. It's one of those things that comes out, and a lot of people have some different opinions on it, as do I, but overall, it's always really interesting to see what the coaches think about this upcoming year, and definitely really interesting who they think is up top, and it's the team that I have up top. It is Georgia. They have a number of the first place votes, 46 out of the, 55 first place votes there, so a huge thing for this program. They are right where they should be. There's no doubt about it. They have the best coach in the country. They have one of the best rosters in the country. They are everything that you want Georgia to be. There are some worries on that defensive side of the ball, but right now they are my top team in the country as well, partly because of the difference in quarterback at Georgia and Ohio State. And Ohio State is 2. They got 7 first place votes in this thing. Definitely a very, very talented, incredible team this upcoming year. It sounds like Will Howard is coming along a little bit more in practice and taking a little bit more ownership of that position. That is absolutely huge for this program and definitely something they need this year. Then you have Oregon and Texas right where they usually are at 3 and 4. Texas did get a first place vote. I have a suspicion that it is Lane Kiffin. I don't know why, but I do think that's who it was. Michigan does have a first place vote all the way down at 10. I think that's just the coach that says, whoever won the last national championship is number one until week one expires. So I do kind of understand that way of thinking. Definitely a very interesting thing to see, but absolutely is one of those things that some old-fashioned coaches absolutely do believe. Bama, starting at 5, is the lowest start they've ever had in the coaches poll since 2009. That's insane, and gives you an idea of just how ridiculous they were throughout that time during Saban's run. Ole Miss right there, Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, and Florida State round out the top 10, and there are a number of really good teams here, but I do have a number of questions. I think you look at a team like, well, actually, I'll get into it here in a second, but let's break down who I think is too high, who I think is too low, and then pretty much everyone else is right around where they should be. Let's start with too high, and I think Michigan at number 8 is just a little bit too high to me. When I look at this team, I have a number of questions, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. But you look at a guy like Alex Orji, who has all of the talent in the world, who has athletic ability that is unlike pretty much any other quarterback in the entire country. Him not being consistent enough is going to be a problem for this offense. If he is the guy and he's the one that trots out there with the first team, he's going to have to be more consistent than he has shown thus far. So I think putting him above, a Penn State, a Florida State, a Missouri, I think I don't necessarily love that too much. I think there's a number of other teams that just feel a little bit more solid to me. I think Penn State's kind of up in the air, definitely some debate there. I think Florida State feels like the more solid team, at least from where I'm standing. Obviously, there's some debate there as well, but when I look at Michigan, there's just too many questions out there for me to sit there and say they are absolutely a top 10 team heading into this year. LSU is also at 12. I don't necessarily love that. I think when you look at it, kind of like Michigan, a little bit more so than Michigan, but there are huge amounts of questions on one side of the ball for me to put them at this position. That defensive side has a number of really good players, and I do think they're going to be a relatively good unit this upcoming year, but we don't know that. It's still very much up in the air, and one of those things that I just need to see more before I'm really confident putting LSU up there. Obviously, I am buying into LSU. I do have them as a playoff team this upcoming year, but I do think going into the year, there are just too many questions for me to sit there and say they are better than a Utah or a Clemson or really even a Tennessee, if I'm being totally honest. So there's a number of different things. I'm betting on them, of course, but still a number of questions that I don't necessarily love around the Tigers right about now. Oklahoma at number 16 is one that I kind of fought back and forth on. I do really like this Oklahoma team. I think they're going to develop into a really fun team, honestly, this upcoming year. But when you look at the two line of scrimmages and you have a number of questions about the depth there, about the confidence of really even the front line in a lot of ways, you have to be worried, especially playing in a conference like the SEC. You're not going to be able to walk into that thing with not elite offensive line play. If you don't walk into that thing without elite offensive line play or defensive line play, you're going to get run all over. That's just the reality, and it's one of those things that when Oklahoma walks into this conference, I just think there's that big hurdle that they're going to have to get over, and while I think a number of other things are in place from the quarterback, running back, wide receiver group, when you have those two line of scrimmage problems, none of that other stuff really matters all that much, because if you can't control the line of scrimmage, you're going to lose way too many games. Florida State is another. I think they could be in this kind of realm of being a little bit too high. I have some questions about that offense, but overall, I don't think it's all that crazy where they're at number 10. On the way to too low. Now we'll get into number 13, Utah. I think when I look at this team, there's no questions. I have a number of questions that are kind of hypothetical. Like, can Cam Rising be who he used to be? Well, if he's healthy, there's no reason to think he can't be. Or can a team that always has a solid running game find a running game? Well, they always do. So I'm not necessarily too worried about that. Andy Ludwig is one of the better coordinators when it comes to setting up a run game for his team. So overall, you look at the questions going into this year for Utah, and they're kind of hypothetical. If Cam Rising does go down, they do have a problem. But if he's healthy, I have no reason to believe anything but he's going to play really good football. The run game could not come along, but they have a number of guys there that I feel confident in, and Andy Ludwig always finds a run game. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Utah has all of these issues, because all the issues are kind of hypothetical at this very moment. They are going to play really good football. I do have them as a top 10 team heading into this year. I think when you have Kyle Whittingham, when you have Morgan Scalley, when you have Andy Ludwig at the coordinator position and the head coaching position, you're going to have really solid football. It might not be, the most flashy thing in the world. It might not be perfect every single week, but they're going to play good defense. They're not going to get penalized a lot, and they're going to make the life really tough on their opponent. So overall, I do have this team a little bit higher than some people do. I'm not necessarily buying into them to run the table in the Big 12 this upcoming year, but at least going into the year, they are the team that I'm circling as the best team in the Big 12 as we head into it. And then number 20, Texas A&M. I think this is a team that has every chance to make a ton of noise this upcoming year. Obviously, playing the schedule that they're going to play, there's going to be a number of chances. Whether you want to, go out and beat LSU or beat Texas at the end of the year, there's a number of different places where A&M can make some noise, really, make a run at possibly even an SEC title or the playoff at the end of the day. And I think you look at some of the teams above them. You have a Miami team that I think is going to be a ton of fun, and I do think is going to be a really good team. I have them going to the playoff as the ACC title champion. But when you look at this team going into the year, there's a ton of transfers. And when you look at a team that is adding that many transfers to particularly a defense that was not necessarily where it needed to be a year ago, you're going to have questions until they step on the field. I do think it's going to be a really awesome team, but when I look at A&M, they just have more stability around the positions that they're going to need to than Miami does at this very moment. Now, I do think Miami's going to likely be a better team, because I think a lot of those transfers are going to come through, but as I head into the season, I would lean A&M just a little bit over Miami, but also I might just have both of them a little bit higher on this list overall. And then number 23, USC. I think this is a team that has just so much potential, and it comes down to one guy. Obviously, when you bring in someone like DeAnton Lynn from UCLA, who had a top 20 unit a year ago, was incredible against the run, and has been just remarkable. He's coming into a defense that frankly just has more talent than the UCLA defense did a year ago. Now, they are far away from where they need to be, obviously, but I do think they're in a position where the offense is going to be explosive. They're going to be able to score points. Miller Moss is playing really good football in fall camp right now, and if you can just play passable defense, you're going to be able to make some plays. So when I look at this team, although I do have questions on one side of the ball, although the defense has not come along the way that I want it to, it doesn't mean they have to come along a very short way to get there. I don't think they have to come, they don't have to get to the top 20 team in the country or top 30 defense in the country by any means. I think they have the ability to get to top 80 and still make a run in this conference and still make some noise. Maybe not win the conference, because that's obviously going to be a huge part of it. But overall, I think they do have the ability to make more noise than maybe some people are thinking right about now. So I think you look at that Penn State game, that would be a huge opportunity for USC to make some noise here and definitely be a big-time problem for some other teams. So overall, I think the Coaches Poll is always kind of a fun thing to break down. To me, it's one of those things that you look at the coaches right about now, they're not focused on about anything else other than their team. So it's one of those things that you tend to get exactly what the media has given you in some different ways. You'll get some ers and ahs here. You'll definitely get some things that will unpack over the rest of the season. But overall, a lot of these coaches are focused on what they're doing. They'll put in, a little 25 team list there, but overall, it's not really their job to worry about it. I don't necessarily think you take too much away from this, but overall, I do think it's really cool to see what the coaches think going into the season, who they think is the top team. They do think it is Georgia, and who they think are some dangerous teams. I think Tennessee fits into that category. I think USC as well. So there's a number of teams that are going to be really fun to watch, but always cool to break down what the coaches think and see, how they're viewing this season as we head into it. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we just have to figure out who needs to have a big-time fall camp. There are a number of teams that we've broken down over the last couple of days. We have 6 more teams for you today, so we'll break them down right after this, so stick with us.